know if I'm going to sit next to her at dinner. You know what I'm saying? They just saw the title of my presentation and try to figure out whether or not they're going to, these are scholars, whether they're going to distance themselves from me because I was a little too black. Right? And they didn't know. They were looking around trying to wage what the white people were going to think. And surely, not after dinner, well, we can hang. Okay? But during dinner, in a long white tablecloth, they got to figure out who they want to be seen with. And maybe I wasn't one of them. Now, there was some that were, by the end, they thought it was okay. But they didn't want to be an embarrassment. They didn't want to be lumped in with whatever I said I was or who I was, which might cause embarrassment to them. There were people during Katrina, black people, who saw those other black people and instead of feeling empathy, felt shame.
Really?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Because they don't want to be identified with them. I've pulled myself up from my bootstraps. I'm certainly not one of those complaining, whining Negroes that are saying, blaming anyone else. I'm not one of them, right? I mean, that's the fear, because that's, again, what's been projected about who we are. So people are trying to distance themselves from that. No, I'm not one of those. If these people just worked hard, that would be fine for them.
Antidote?
Well, the truth. It's the truth. We've got to tell the truth. Okay. There will be no choice left. We are going to have to do that in order to survive here. I would venture to say within the next 10 years, if we don't recognize that we have to raise the bar, certainly not lower it. We got to raise it, and we got to reach it in order to survive here.
Okay.
That's the reality. And I think that again, the notion of a community of leaders. I'm telling my children, yes, it's nice. I'm glad you're going to school. You got to get, but you need to have a plan B. Okay, let me just tell you now. You better find a plan B. You better figure out a way to own it and run it, and not look for the job, because the job may not be there. But you need to start thinking more as, again, leadership in all those areas, and particularly in business.
The spate of reports recently about corporate theft is just rampant among the headlines for some time now. Is this a post-traumatic event for the power elite?
Interesting. I had the opportunity. I wish I would have had some. I spoke with other people who this is their area. Certainly not my genre.
Okay.
But I saw the video. The smartest guys in the room, and the Enron, the smartest guys in the room, and I was blown completely away. I was totally blown away. You know, I started trying to find something comparable in my life to fit with what they did, and greed begets greed. Privilege begets greed. Privilege begets this notion of being above the law, because you've always been above the law. You know what I'm saying? It never applied to you. And simply something as simple as saying, well, you know, here's a huge company. We're talking about billions of dollars that was never real. That was what was amazing to me. I'm not talking about floating a check. Okay, I'm not talking about floating a check. I'm talking about saying, well, I'm not going to check them out if Merrill Lynch signed on. Why should I have to check whether they're legit if Merrill Lynch signed on? So everyone signed on to an invisible amount of money because of greed, power, and the whole notion of privilege. So amazing. And it's simply what it was. These were folks that were above reproach. They were above questioning because the name signified. That was simply enough. That means that you had to be, you know, certainly ethical. No one questioned. No one looked at the books. No one looked to even see if the money was there, and it never was. So it was absolutely the superiority, the arrogance. I mean, that's what the word that comes out constantly when you see these people, arrogance. Where do you get that arrogance? You're privileged. You've been running it this way and, you know, having differential treatment your entire existence. So why should it stop now? Only now the people that got hurt got mad at you. Okay, some of those folks had enough power to say, oh, wait, we can do it to them, but you don't get to do that to me because I look like you. You don't get to do that to me. See, that's where the buck stopped. If it was you or I mean, we wouldn't even probably reach the news. But when they started looking, you know, doing it to each other, then it was like, oh, wait a minute now. You don't get to do that to me. And I really believe it is a reflection of an out-of-control amount of power and privilege, which has been born from misusing, rape, and pillage, you know, all across the world.
Yeah.
And so I think that, you know, eventually that's going to catch up with you. And it is, on a global level, catching up. You know, we have to, here's the bottom line, we need to play well with others and share. It's something we're going to have to do. We don't want to do it, but we're going to have to share and play well with the others. In addition to that, we're going to have to be more appreciative of our earth, who is weary of us.
I want to tread in an area that maybe I shouldn't, but I can't resist it.
Okay.
About who Joy Leary is. I've seldom heard you talk about your parents. Can you give us at least a snapshot or two?
You know, my parents, you know, they said you learn to really appreciate and respect your parents when you become one. You know, and I'm not only a parent now, but I'm a grandparent. And so I appreciate what my parents had to work with, what they had to contend with while raising children that they wanted to feel a sense of dignity and a sense of value and worth. And it was a difficult thing. My father was a proud, proud man. He died earlier than he should have.
Really?
Surely. My father died as a result of many complications of alcoholism. While he had was no longer drinking when he died, many of those years of trying to drown out a lot of the pain and the feeling of disrespect that he had to shoulder, it took its toll. And similarly on my mother, who also had severe complications as a result of alcoholism. And I know that my parents, the one thing they did was they raised us to be children that questioned, which was new and unique. Because, you know, we were raised in a seen but not heard kind of environment. Children don't engage with adults. This is, you know, and my father said, if you have a question, there's something you need to know, there is no question that you cannot ask, so long as you ask it in an appropriate way. But if you want to know, I don't care who it is standing in front of you, you get to ask that question. So my father would engage us in conversations from religion to politics to
our history?
Our history, everything.
Really?
He called himself an Asiatic black man before people were saying black was beautiful. And I remember, I recount this in my book, this story of my father. And my mother was, let me just kind of give you a picture. My mother was a mother of the community. My mother always said to me, you know, like whenever I would whine or complain, she used to always give me the little quote, which would always put me in place. She said I used to cry because I had no shoes until I met a man who had no feet. So, Joy, it may be deep for you, but trust me, it's deeper for someone else. And there's always enough. So there was never a time in my house when you didn't have enough food to feed whoever walked through that door. There is always, I was raised with, there will always be enough. So we always had folks at the house. She fed the whole neighborhood, my mother. You know, and that was just her idea, is that there's always enough. And my father grew out of a very proud tradition. You know, these are folks from Louisiana, from the bayou. I mean, serious.
Really?
My grandfather was no joke. He did not play. Everybody, black and white, respected my grandfather. And my father kind of grew up with that whole notion, but he walked into an extremely, when he moved from the South, the huge migration to the South, you know, from the South to the North, and particularly, you know, my family, some of us moved to California, Los Angeles, you know, then they started to, you know, that's when the pressures came on. My father worked every day of his life, never missed a day of work, 16 years, and suddenly was laid off with nothing. And it devastated him.
That's when he began to take it out on himself.
That's when the fall happened. But there was an incident that occurred. My mother's father is from Jamaica and Belize.